Good afternoon, and welcome to the Carolina Codecast, the official podcast of the Carolina Code Conference. With me today is Jās Eckard. Say hello, Jās.
Hey there.
So what are you up to these days?
Oh, well, I don't know. I'm, just working from home, able to do that since since COVID. So it's nice. I've been working at VMware for the past year and a half or so.
So what do you do at VMware now?
Okay. So I work for the division that was acquired recently. SaltStack.
Oh, nice.
If you're familiar with Salt, it's kind of one of the other infrastructure as code as opposed to Puppet, Chef, Ansible. I fell in love with Salt whenever I was at Clemson because Clemson uses it a lot, and I just fell in love with it. And eventually got this job with them, and they were acquired by VMware. VMware is now incorporating it into a lot of their products. It's really awesome.
Interesting.
And it's
now so for somebody who's a big Ansible user like myself, sell me on SaltStack. Oh
boy, well, there's so many things. So first of all, it was originally built to be just a remote procedure call system. It eventually became a infrastructure as code and code management or a system management system. But it's as opposed to Ansible, which is agentless. The default for Salt is with an agent, so it's much faster communication. You don't have to SSH every single time. Although you can have that as your infrastructure. You could just do agentless if you want.
And so, for any listeners who aren't familiar with what we're talking about right now, when we are talking about infrastructure as code and configuration tools, when we're talking about using something like Ansible, you would end up writing basically a playbook in Ansible, and it would go and connect to a Linux machine, and it would go through and say, install these packages for me and modify these configuration files, and then restart these services. And it can tell what's already been run and what hasn't, so it doesn't repeat work that's already been done. And so you can run these things, you can keep adding to them as you go and as you update the configuration, and it will just go and make just the changes that it needs to make. And so what we're talking about here when we talk about agentless versus with an agent is that when you're using Ansible, if you're trying to connect to 10,000 machines, Ansible is going to go and connect directly to all 10,000 of those machines over SSH and run the commands directly. Whereas something with an agent like Salt or Puppet or something like that, it's going to pull the configuration down from something central, and there's going to be an agent running on each one of those machines that will then take the commands and run it and modify the state. So just to get the listeners caught up if they're not familiar with that. So go ahead and continue on with Salt.
So the point of being an agent style, and again, that's the default infrastructure. You can do an SSH infrastructure where like Ansible does. Or you can even have so it's called a master minion, which is kind of a client server relationship by default. But you can also have a masterless, where each system has its own configuration files and does the stuff. Anyway, so it's faster than most systems are, and it's also, in my opinion, what's called runbooks or playbooks or recipes in Chef. Or whatever they're called in Puppet, I don't remember, but they're called salt states. They, in my opinion, are a lot more elegant. They're easier to understand. They're
not written in YAML.
But it is written in YAML. It's a different YAML. Gotcha. I just enjoy it much more, and it's also kind of in my opinion, a little more readable. But I've only touched a little bit on Ansible, so I can't really have a really bad opinion of them because it's a great.
Well, I mean, I got really into Ansible mainly because when I was looking at all the other options, everything required an agent, and what I got kind of tired of was investing my time in learning these different configuration systems and then getting to a new place and them telling me, oh, well, you don't have permission to install that agent on these machines. But if I have SSH access to the machines, I can use whatever I want. I mean, there's no difference between me using Ansible to SSH to a machine and do something and save myself time versus just manually SSHing into the machine and modifying it myself. And so I invested my time in Ansible mostly because I wanted something that was more portable with me, that I didn't have to ask permission for. And that was my very selfish reason for learning that. But if Salt has an option to go over SSH, that's interesting, and I would be very interested to see if it was faster over SSH than Ansible was too.
I see. Now that I'm not sure about it. It may be, it may not be. I'm not sure.
I'm curious.
But and that system has been around for a while. It's called Salt SSH, but there's a new kind of an updated version of it called Salt Heist. Where it heists into the system, installs a micro agent, does only the required systems where you install this package and check this configuration file, just those little commands, and then it removes itself to return back. So it does do that agent communication. Salt Heist is and I haven't actually messed with it myself, but it sounds really cool. But for small tasks, I don't know that it's necessarily worth it. But for if you're like going and deploying something to tons of different systems, it might be something to look into.
Yeah, I'm intrigued. I mean, just the idea of being able to have a direct over SSH option that could easily convert to an agented option for the efficiencies long term. Because I mean, you can do a pull mode with Ansible where it works like that. But you don't really hear about people doing it that often.
And it's my understanding, like at the last Ansible Con or convention, whatever, that they were starting to have Ansible agents and Ansible. Is it towers? A tower having.
So that's a Red Hat thing, Ansible, if I remember right. So Red Hat has like Ansible Tower as a central place to manage it, so that your team can connect and they can run things on and manage the permissions and sharing and who has access to what and all that, and the various credentials that go along with all of it. But I don't know if there are agents involved in it. I don't think there are agents involved in it, but I think it's mostly just sort of a team management tool. That
I may be mistaken,
but
too.
Anything's possible. I'm not an expert on it. I've just tinkered with it enough to be dangerous.
And a lot of ideas get passed from one thing to another all the time. When something works, you steal the idea.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's for so much of it. I talk to companies about this stuff all the time when it comes to the technology that they're using under the hood of what they're doing and people's motivations to learn that technology. If you've built some in-house monstrosity that you're very, very proud of, every single new developer that you hire has to be motivated to learn that thing. And if you're using something that's under the hood that's open source, that they may have learned ahead of time, or you could go ahead and put on the resume, it saves you the training time, but it also keeps them more motivated because it's expertise that they can take with them if they want to. And motivation is key. And so that was where I always struggled with, because back when I got into Ansible, Puppet was the big thing. And it was the agented thing. And I was actually working at Windstream at the time, and I was doing like production support work. And everything I was doing there was just a bunch of like hard-coded Perl scripts. Like we were just getting directly into the machine, and we're using these Perl scripts to modify and deploy everything and check deployments and all that. And most of it we just wrote ourselves. But having a better way to do it, we looked at Puppet, and that was the thing at the time. And ultimately, it was just sort of decided, well, you're never getting permission to install this on all the computers. So just go ahead and get that idea out of your head right now. But if I'd had Ansible back then, I could have just used it, and then I could have just basically hit a button and retired.
If I'd had either Ansible or Puppet or Chef or Salt many, many years ago at this place that I worked, it would have been so time saving. I must have had, I don't know how many shell scripts and tickle TK stuff and Perl, like you say, and Python, just all this duct tape stuff together.
So many Perl scripts with Regexes in them to just find things in configuration files and replace them and oh god, I mean it worked and it was awesome when it did, but there's there's nothing quite like making you feel like you're doing super powered geek things, like using Perl on Linux computers. You just feel like you need the hoodie and everything, and just to pull it up.
And what's the TCL?
I've never even used TCL
system that Expect. Oh yeah, have you ever used Expect? Okay, so it was a way to get around the SSH passwords and stuff. You know, you would SSH to a place and your script would expect the password prompt, and maybe it's uppercase P and a lowercase p, so you use a regular expression for P, and then it would send that and expect that you logged in, and so Expect was I
do remember that
TCL.
I remember Expect. Yeah, because bypassing the SSH logins was always such a golly. There were so many headaches in there, and it's funny how whenever you get into some of the systems and you have like muscle memory for what you're doing. I remember I used to, at one point I worked with an admin who, he gave me, I was on the system and I had root access to the system with my user. And whenever I would want to do something with root, rather than doing it with my own user, or rather than doing it with my own user or his own user, I would end up switching into the root user. It's not good practice, I know, but there's some things that you just do. But what drove him nuts was that I removed the audit trail entirely because I wouldn't use the I wouldn't switch to the root user directly from my user. I would do the sudo -s. And as soon as I did the sudo -s, it apparently removed his ability to track who switched to root. And I was like, that seems like a major thing that they should fix, but this is just how I've done it for years, and it's a reflex at this point. And granted, he and I were the only two people that had access to the machine, so it didn't matter that much, but they
wanted to make sure it wasn't him, right?
Yeah. Well, look, don't get me wrong. He was a much more experienced sysadmin than I was, and so he was very, very particular about exactly how everything needed to be done. And don't get me wrong, the guy was an absolute genius. It was fantastic. I learned a ton from him. His name's David D. He's out in Colorado now. I used to work with him at DMartian. He was awesome. I probably need to have him on this podcast at some point. But,
I do recognize the name.
But yeah. So anyway, all right. So back to you. We kind of went down the salt train. So sum it up real quick. What's your biggest love of SaltStack?
Well, like I said, it's flexibility. I mean, you can also, if you have a Puppet or Chef or Ansible system, you can actually use Salt to use those systems to get your information.
Really?
Yeah, it's a lot of integration. And I know that Ansible has some plugins for using Salt modules too, as well. So there's this intertwined stuff. So yeah, it'll interact with a Ansible tower too, I think. Yeah, so there's all this stuff.
I'll make a sticky note here to research Salt. Give me one more thing on the to-do list.
Well, I'll be glad to give a demonstration sometime.
Say that again.
I said I'd be glad to give a demonstration.
That seems like it'd be a great thing to do. Where, pray tell, would you give such a demonstration? Would it be at, say, a meetup group here in Greenville, or would it be at a conference? Which one would you prefer I ask you about first?
I'm doing both. As you know, I run the Upstate Carolina.
Yes, I do.
But I've also helped with that group, helped to start the Southeast Linux Fest. And I've talked at that conference as well.
Yeah, so. Southeast Linux Fest is, I wasn't able to make it this year. I was out of town when y'all had it. But I've been to it several times before. Y'all had it in Columbia a few years back, or maybe a decade ago.
No, it started in 2009 at Clemson.
Okay.
Because Clemson Linux Users Group hosted us at the Hendricks Student Center. And that was fantastic to be able to, because we had it was starting from scratch.
I had no idea. That's awesome.
And that was 2009, the first year. The next 2 years, maybe 3, it was in Spartanburg.
Okay.
And then from that point forward, it's been in Charlotte.
Maybe I'm thinking about Spartanburg, because I know I went to it it's somewhere in South Carolina. It must have been Spartanburg. It's been a long time. My biggest memory of going to that thing is that there was a recruiter who'd been trying to get in touch with me for like a month and a half, and we just kept not being able to get in touch with each other. And I walked in, and I just sort of walked up to the table. I didn't actually realize that she was the recruiter that was there, and I introduced myself to the table to all of them, and she just flipped out. And I've never been more shocked for anybody to be happy to see me in my life. And I kid you not, she turned around and I said, "Hi, my name's Barry Jones," and then she was like literally facing the other direction while I was talking to these guys at the table, and she turns around and goes, "The Barry Jones?" I was like, I was terrified.
Wow.
But anyway, that was my biggest Southeast Linux Fest memory from back then. But I do remember thinking it was awesome seeing all these. You had a lot of sponsors that were from Linux providing computer systems and stuff that I didn't even know existed at the time. And I thought it was really interesting. Yeah. Now I'm a big System 76 user and everything. I actually got a System 76 laptop right here. So I went fully into that world. But I mean, y'all have always done a great job with it. So tell me a little more about the Southeast Linux Fest. How do y'all end up doing it? Is it multi-track? Is it single track? I mean,
yeah, it's a multi-track, and it's actually in a convention center hotel, and they have multiple parts of the large dining room. You know how not dining room, ballroom. You know how convention centers, they have a ballroom and they have dividers and make those into smaller rooms. So that's usually where the multiple tracks are. There's also side rooms and that sort of thing for smaller tracks. Usually it's 3, sometimes 6 tracks because of 3 to 6 rooms or something like that. But it's often 3. And then there's like an adjoining like sub-conference sort of thing. That there, like many years ago, there was Introduction to Cloud. That was a whole track that one year. It wasn't specifically Southeast Linux Fest, but as an add-on, you could, in the same building, in the same hallway, you could go to this other conference called Introduction to Cloud, and cloud.com was there, for example, and other dealers. I think that, in fact, Salt was introduced, or it was one of the places that Salt was introduced. It's like one of 10 conferences that Thomas Hatch, who started it, came to.
Really?
I think. I didn't know about it at the time, though, but I wish I would have known.
But y'all put the talks online these days now, right? How long have you been doing that?
Yeah. They're all put on YouTube. Yep. And so I'm no longer a part of the organization, but I helped to start it, and I'm very proud of it, and I enjoy going and hope to give talks every once in a while whenever I can. But I love the group there. They're like family. So it started in 2009 from a group of guys at the Upstate Carolina Linux Users Group, which I mentioned I'm kind of the leader of. And a group of guys got together and said, I really like Ohio Linux Fest. I liked Atlanta Linux Expo. And we know about Northwest Linux Fest and Southern California Linux Expo. Why don't we have one here in the Southeast? And they got together and kind of got the ball rolling, kind of similar to what you had done with Carolina Codes, and just found through people and communications and stuff, found a way to make it happen. And got in touch with a lot of the lugs from the Southeast. There were the Atlanta Linux enthusiasts, the SharLug and Cola Lug and Clemson Lug, because they were the ones that hosted, and Charleston Lug, some from the North Carolina, of course, Trilug. A lot of people from there and worked at Red Hat, and so they brought Red Hat in, and then Ubuntu was a new thing, so there was an Ubuntu con.
It's hard to imagine Ubuntu being a new thing.
Yeah, it's amazing how things just kind of fall together whenever you ask.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, I mean, you mentioned a lot of the various Linux user groups right there. So, I understand you've managed to find a way to actually thrive. A lot of the, one of the things we talked about with the conference is that a lot of meetups kind of floundered with everything with COVID, and either just tried to go remote and it didn't work out, or just shrank in general, because y'all was sort of almost like a chaptered organization where you've got Linux user groups in every area that somewhat share an affiliation, but they're all kind of independent. So y'all partnered up with the Columbia group and grew, from what I understand. So tell me about that.
Yeah,
I'm going to mute because my dog's making noise in the background over here.
It was kind of a coincidental sort of thing. I was working at Clemson at the time, and a friend of mine that I knew from UCLUG, he got a job with Clemson as well, and he came and moved up to the Clemson area, and was working with me. We were coworkers. I knew him, like I said, I'd known him ahead of time from Southeast Linux Fest, which I may say self if I keep saying self. That's what I'm saying. So I knew him from Southeast Linux Fest, and we were both groups were having kind of trouble getting, and this was about 2016, 2017 or so. We were having trouble getting people to speak, and so we both said, wouldn't it be good if we kind of pooled our resources together, get on some sort of teleconferencing sort of software, like what was it at the time? There was Teams wasn't a thing at the time, but WebEx, we could do WebEx together or something like that. Google Plus, I think, was a thing, so we used that for several years. But so,
I haven't heard of anybody that used Google Plus for anything. That's incredible.
Yeah, it was awesome. It was great for what it did. So he and I got together and said, well, how about we have the two meetings on the same night, and you have it one month and we have it another month, and it just kind of worked that way. And that's what we did, and that was again in 2017, 2016 maybe. Every other month would be from each group, and that way we could take a break every other month, and wouldn't have to find someone to give a talk or something like that. And we just have kept it up since then. When the pandemic hit, it was just kind of all right, we're not going to be in the actual place that we were at. We'll just do it from home. Everyone does it from home. I mean, here's the link to the Jitsi. We use Jitsi for the Zooming, yep. I guess. We just kept doing that once a month. Got people to talk, and actually, I think we had some people from completely other states to give talks. That's the cool thing about teleconferencing.
That's very true.
Was able to keep that up. So yeah, you mentioned how hard it is to keep a group going. It's been hard for us, but someone once told me that UCLUG is a meritocracy, and what I interpret from that is that if I want to see stuff, if I want to talk about stuff, then I need to make sure that happens. And so I have been the one that has been doing that because I'm the one that wants to see interesting new stuff.
Yeah,
so
I can understand
I've been
that.
Finding people and talking and asking questions and coordinating with another lug and all sorts of things like that.
It's good to see that, motivation has a path for whenever you're doing those types of things, because that's definitely something that I relate to on the conference side of things, because there's so many interesting. The thing that always got me before the conference was happening was that you'd always hear about all these interesting things that people were doing, and I spent most of my time just telling everybody else about all this other interesting stuff that was happening. And now I just get to go, hey, you tell them yourself. It's a lot simpler. But what you mentioned about y'all get a speaker and then we'll get a speaker and we'll take turns and everything, that there's a lot to be said for that. A lot of people take on, doing these meetups every month entirely on their own, and then they get really demoralized if people don't show up one month or something like that. And just having people to share the load with is big. That's actually one of the big things that Jim's been trying to do with the Hat Greenville stuff, is to make sure there's a support system for the meetup runners.
And I feel like that you took that ball too for Carolina Code Conference. That's exactly what you've been doing, is pooling resources of all the different. Because the first thing you asked all of these tech groups.
It didn't work at all, but I tried.
No, but it's a great idea though. It's beneficial. It's,
and so I mean, Jim and the OpenWorks folks around Hack Greenville have really tried to solidify this into a good structure. I mean, with the Refactor Greenville folks coming in and kind of trying to provide a 501c3 umbrella to this and to really create the structure. I mean, he's been having the meetings. He's been getting people together. He's been taking notes and feedback and communicating out to everybody else on this stuff. The most that I did was I just kind of yelled, I want the meetups back. And I just kept saying it and hope that the energy around the conference would do that. Jim's the one who's really taken that and focused on launching the meetups. But one thing that I really do hope to do with the conference is I really do hope at some point that the initial goal of letting the meetups channel speakers into the conference will work out, because I would love nothing more than to go into a conference one year, than to go into a Carolina Code conference one year. And every single speaker I'm announcing, and this speaker is from UCLUG, and this speaker is from Upstate Ruby, and this speaker is from Charleston Python, and just really raise awareness of the various meetup groups and get those meetup groups involved. I think that would be a great culmination event for all of the meetups in the area and kind of the Quad State area. If we can pull it off, it remains to be seen if anything like that will actually happen. And I've got to figure out some type of structure to make it work. But in the meantime, we'll just keep doing what we're doing. And I'm not going to lie, if you're listening to this and you're thinking about submitting a talk to the Carolina Code Conference in the future, if you fill in that form that says, I represent meetup whatever, I strongly factor that in, because I want that type of representation at the event. That's important to me. But that's all I'm going to give away in my selection process, though.
And if I may say, if anyone is wanting to talk to at the Carolina Code Conference and you need a warm-up place to do it, Linux users group.
Absolutely. And look, y'all have had me out a bunch of times talking it, and I really enjoyed it. Yeah. And you've moved. But
so as a selfish thing, what I've done in the past is like when I was taking a class in presenting to my classroom about a new technology in computers. I would give my talk at the Linux user group first, work out all the kinks, and then give it in class and get a better grade.
That makes good sense.
But for people that are better, that if you've got a talk that you're wanting to give at a conference and you want it to be a little more professional, you want to have maybe questions you hadn't thought about be given. I think a local group in that corner of whatever, if it's Linux or if it's, well, really we take any kind of technology sort of thing, but try that out first, maybe as a warm up, and you'll become more comfortable talking in front of people. You'll get your flow may change. You'll get questions that you hadn't thought about.
Yeah, that is probably something that needs to be said more often. I mean, you really nailed it. People need to start speaking at these local meetups, take advantage of the opportunities to speak at local meetups and speak at these various different events. Because no matter how much you research something or about something, it's great that you have that knowledge, but you need to share the knowledge. And when you share the knowledge, if you're really excited about something that you're going to spend that much time on it, people will get that excitement from you. Like I remember, so you watched all the talks at the conference this year, right? So there were a lot of interesting talks on there. One of them one of the things that's actually come up as I've talked to people from the conference is that they talk about technologies that they learned about or things that were interesting that they said, I'm never ever going to use this, but I think it's incredible. Like I was talking to Kevin Dees, you can and he you can listen to the podcast we just put out with him, and he's like, I'm not a Java or a Ruby guy, but I found the JRuby talk fascinating that Charles Nutter gave. Yeah, and I know when I was sitting there, it was a 10-minute lightning talk, but Nate got up there talking about WebGL, and I'm just sitting there like my head's exploding. I'm like, you can do all this stuff with JavaScript in a browser? I had no idea.
Yeah, I had no idea.
And I have no idea where to start with or anything. But there's a meetup running in Greenville right now, just on oh God, what was that technology called?
3D. You talking about the web?
Yeah.
3D.
What was the technology?
3D web. Yeah.
Oh, that's going to drive me nuts. Now I have to look it up because, sorry, Nate, if you're listening, I promise. It's in my head right now. Let's see. We had 3JS.
Yes,
3JS.
3JS.
Yeah, so there's the 3JS meetup in Greenville now that he's been getting going. Just talking about, doing 3D open WebGL rendering and JavaScript, and I mean, you should definitely check out the talk, which is online on our YouTube channel.
And since he gave that talk, I've been wanting to go to the meetings now. So yeah,
absolutely,
awesome.
Yep.
Yeah. My favorite story about what you're talking about is several years ago at the Linux Users Group, I gave a demonstration of Screen. You're probably, most people nowadays use tmux, but Screen.
I'm an old Screen fan, so I'm with you.
Oh, are you? All right. So I introduced Screen because not a lot of people had used it, and I was giving the whole talk and telling you all the different things you could do, windowing, and you could do reattachments, and blah blah blah. And at the very end of it, there's this guy. He's looking at me like, and I'm like, "You have a question?" And he's like, I thought this was just a way to serial connect to my modems and stuff." And I'm like, "You can serial connect to your modem with this stuff?" Like, yeah, that's what I've only ever used it for. I'm like, I didn't know I could do that. So now, I threw out my terminal emulator, and that's what I just screamed out. It just blew me away. So two different people used the same program for two completely different.
I didn't even know that was a thing you could do.
Yeah.
Goodness gracious.
So you just you screen to dev TTY-S0 or something like that, and now you're talking to your modem, or you're talking to your Cisco router or whatever, that sort of thing, over a null modem. It's just like, I had no idea. But yeah,
it's crazy the word stuff
and
you learn.
Given presentations is how I learn a little bit more things about things, because like last month, Linux Users Group, I was given a presentation on some bash tips, but even then, as I'm giving a talk, telling people I'm a bash user, I've been using, I know how to do, and still there were little things that, oh, well, don't you want to do that? And I was like, you can do that?
Yep, that tracks. There's so much stuff under the hood that people find. This is one of the reasons I'm a big advocate for pair programming too. And so, and I used to hate the idea of it, of like, I don't want you watching while I'm typing stuff, and and then I did it one time, and this was like 10 years ago or something like that, and I was pair programming with this guy in Seattle who was using one of the JetBrains IDEs, and I was watching him, and he took over to show me some stuff after I had been doing it. And it wasn't even the code that he was writing. He was just jumping around in the IDE so fast and like quick referencing things that his cursor was on and like finding where it originally came from. I was like, there's a hotkey for that? You can do that? And it changed the entire way that it worked.
Yeah. Slow down. Well, how did you do that?
I mean, goodness. David, the Linux guy I was telling you about earlier, David D, he's an avid user of a Linux tool called multitail. And it's basically just it's this simple tool where if you want to tail multiple files at the same time and stream them, it organizes it on the screen so you can actually do it. It's life-changing. I mean, wow. You just say multitail and like asterisk.log and it'll just
wow.
Yeah, it's great. You really will.
That. Yeah.
Yeah. Every single person that has seen it has been just blown away.
That's
and
awesome.
It's funny too. Like my son is, I'm slowly getting him into Linux and everything. He's doing like some Python classes at school and everything. And so I showed him HTOP in the terminal, and he thought that was the coolest thing he'd ever seen in his life. And granted, it is. HTOP's a really, really slick interface on a command line GUI. I mean, but it's interesting the things that you learn just by observing other people. Like, oh God, what was it? We were talking about earlier with all the various technologies and scripts that we have put together. Before I learned Ansible and I needed to automate a bunch of machines, one time I came up with this. It sounds so much worse than it really was to say it, but this combination Ruby and Perl setup. So it was really just Ruby. It was essentially just Ruby, but I needed a way. So I was using Ruby to kind of be the coordinator to run through everything, and then to step through and verify that each step had been completed. But then I needed a way to run the same commands on multiple different machines and then track the output of them and find out if there was a problem. And so there's in the Perl CPAN repository that has all of the libraries, there's a library that I have sworn by for years called SSH batch. And you don't actually have to write any Perl code to use it. Just once you do it, it creates these 3 commands on your computer, and you can create a file that has essentially lists of machines, and you can give them like group names and whatever else. And you can say, run this command on this set of machines, and you can add and subtract to add individual machines or subtract them from it if you want to. And so if you need to deploy to half a cluster and restart that half a cluster and then make sure they come up and they're working, and then you switch the load balancer and then you do the same thing on the other half of the cluster. I mean, you just needed to run the commands on the different machines, but it was doing expect behind the scenes to help with the logins and streamlining all that stuff. It was great. And I was using Ruby as the coordinator for all of it, but
right.
But golly, Ansible would have made it so much easier. If anybody saw that code now, I mean, they're probably crying. But it worked though. Yep, exactly. Right? I don't even know if I have that code anymore. I'm usually good about keeping the little things that I cobble together like that, but not so much.
It's funny, I go through my GitLab and I say, oh, what is this that I did many years ago?
Yeah. Well, it was you met Christina Roberts, right? She talks at a lot of local events and everything too. And I remember seeing she posted something on LinkedIn the other day, and it was about looking at a bunch of code and going, "Who in the world would have written something this stupid? Get blamed." Oh, that was me, like a year ago. Like that's a familiar refrain.
Which I have always adopted the philosophy: be kind to the next programmer, because it may be you.
That's a good philosophy. That is a very good philosophy. So when's the next UCLUG coming up?
So we always meet on the second Tuesday of the month. November, I guess that's what, the 14th? Does that sound right? Hold on. I've actually got notes, didn't I? I put notes. I don't know. It's November. The November group, November 14th. There it is. November 14th. We've got a former member who has moved to the Midwest, and he is now a white hat hacker. He works for a security firm, and he is going to talk about low Earth orbit satellites.
Really?
I think that he has designed some. So I'm actually getting in touch with, or I've gotten in touch with, not OpenWorks, but I've gotten in touch with Synergy Mill, and they're going to show up, Joey's going to be showing up and going to talk about Synergy Mill and how you can use Synergy Mill for your embedded systems that you might want to put in space or something like that. So I'm really excited about that.
That's interesting.
Low Earth orbit satellites. This guy, like I say, he grew up around here, and fantastic person. I have learned so many things about security from him.
What's his name?
Alone. Things that I never really thought about to be more secure, And then I'm also really excited about our December 12th meeting, which is we're going to be. It's actually, in retrospect, it's kind of a dry topic, licensing, but I'm really excited because our speaker is also a former. Well, I say former, but he's still, everyone's still kind of a member of the Linux users group, the UCLUG. That he's now working for a major corporation. More major cloud corporation and as well as a major open source organization, I'm going to be vague about who I'm talking about. And, so look at the announcements. I don't have permission from anyone.
Gotcha.
And some people like their privacy, like security.
Yeah, I understand that. I can respect that.
But he's going to be talking about licensing, especially in light of Red Hat putting things behind their source code behind the firewall, the corporate firewall, and the Terraform license change, and the business software license that HashiCorp has been doing. So he's going to give us some opinions on that because like I say, he runs a particularly large foundation that has licenses and opinions about that. And I'm really looking forward to.
Is it involved with frequent patches of web servers by any chance?
Perhaps.
I think I actually might know who you're talking about. We can talk about that after the fact.
You probably do.
Yeah, those both actually sound really good. And so we can find out about that on. I know we'll find out about it in the Hack Greenville events page and the events channel in there. But where can we find out about the UCLUG events?
Well, like you said, I've been trying to make sure to incorporate our announcements with Hack Greenville. We have our own website, UCLUG.org, but I also am on gettogether.community, which is an alternative to Meetup. We try to use open source as an open source community. We try to use open source wherever possible. I'd heard about Get Together at Southeast Linux Fest. It's a group of guys that's near Cullowhee.
Really?
Silva, I think and they just created this website called gettogether.community. It's a meetup-like place. And I was like, hey, let's move to there. We're on Get Together. Google Groups houses our, I use it as a mailing list, but it can be used as a forum. And then, of course, in the Pound Linux, or Hash Linux, if you're newer than dirt like me, the Pound Linux group in the Hack Greenville Slack. I think we've still got an IRC channel, to be honest, but I haven't been there in years. But that's where I have all my announcements. So Hack Greenville has allowed me to start announcing with meetup.com. So if you join the Hack Greenville meetup, you may hear from me for Linux Users Group. And that's the great thing. I like you talking about Jim. I appreciate him allowing us to do that. And so we're a member of Hack Greenville.
That's good.
And that's
you can't promote too much. Said, that's Jim, one thing I have definitely learned.
Yeah, and Jim has been doing a fantastic job, like you say, about the community, trying to get community groups together. And that's one avenue I think that others should take advantage of, like we are. Definitely.
Well, I will be happy to post a little something about it on the conference's social channels as well. If you send me a blurb about it in the meantime.
All of our previous meetings, well, not all, but a lot over the past couple of years have been, although we have the meeting on Jitsi, we also stream it to YouTube, nice. And so we save this.
Doing that with the security guys too.
And
all right, yeah. I'm happy to hear that.
And YouTube's not exactly an open source group, but you kind of go where the people are too.
Nice. There are two friends of mine who are big ham radio guys, and they're certified. They're in the emergency response network and everything. And
awesome.
When you start talking about stuff with low orbit satellites, I know both of them are going to want to be there for that, or they're going to at least want to be able to watch it if they can't be there for it for some reason. Yeah. So
it's
real interesting topics that people get into.
And and beyond that, anyone who wants to talk, give me a holler on any one of those channels, whether that's the Hack Greenville Slack, Pound Linux, or UCLUG.org, or Get Together, or what was the other ones that I
Meetup,
the Google Group.
Nice.
So, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Got anything else you want to close us out with?
No, I want to say how much I appreciate you just thinking of me. I'm honored.
Oh, are you kidding me? Look, you are very much one of the local community leaders around here, whether you want to accept that or not. I mean, anybody who has been driving a meetup forward for this long and getting this many people together for this long, whatever your motivations happen to be for it, if you just selfishly wanted to know more, it still serves as a huge benefit. And so I definitely respect that you don't get out there and kind of wave around, look at me too much. But I want to get people to look at you, because you have a really good thing going with these meetup groups, and I've been really happy to be able to visit on a couple of occasions as well.
And we love having you there, because the one you had about Ansible, do the local Ansible.
I've actually given 2 Ansible talks. There was that one, and then there was the Ansible and Terraform, the PB&J of DevOps.
That's right.
And that one,
that's right.
That one's going to be really difficult with the whole ToFu thing, because they're going to make me change my title, and I don't know that ToFu goes with PB&J in any way, shape, or form. So I'm going to have to.
I hadn't thought about that.
I'm going to have to figure something else out there, but we'll get there.
So the SALT project is got a sister project called IDEM, which is short for IDEM Potent, and IDEM's focus is on clouds APIs. So it might be an alternative to Terraform. You might want to look into that again, part of VMware, and a lot of VMware products are starting to use IDEM under the cover.
I can respect that, but at the same time, I think I'm going to go back to my whole open source initiative and the "can I take it with me" mantra. Am I going to invest the time into learning something that is going to primarily work with VMware, or am I going to invest my time in something that I can use with VMware and everything else?
Which is why I'm glad IDEM is.
That's fantastic. Source. Now, if they get the level of support that OpenTofu has, that'd be fantastic. But it's all going to come down to the licensing now. Everybody's paranoid about that. But it seems like people are pretty happy with the OpenTofu move from everything that I've seen, at least so far. I haven't tried it yet, but I'm hearing good things. But anyway, thank you very much, Jace. Enjoyed having you today. And let me give my final shout out, of course, to Herd Media. Thank y'all for helping to coach me through how to do this podcast and help us put this stuff together for the community. I think it's really helping out a lot of people. So if you're ever looking to start a podcast and need some guidance or professional help, depending on the scale and scope you're going for, talk to Herd Media right here in Greenville. All right. Thanks a lot, Chase.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it.